QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Memorized Transactions Overview. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in QuickBooks. We will set up another QuickBooks file just to practice the memorized transactions, but for now we just want to take a look at the memorized transactions, an example of them, the location of where the memorized transactions will be. Then we'll talk about a list of common memorized transactions, and then we'll go into more detail on recording a few of them for practice. So one of the more common memorized transactions would be to enter a bill. If a bill is going to happen every month, we might enter the bill to basically remind us on a monthly basis of that transaction. Entering a bill can also be useful if you're using bank feeds and the amount is going to be automatically coming out of the bank or something like that. You can enter the bill and match it up to basically the bank, and you can still have that kind of double check as we enter the data and then check that it clears the bank as we would expect it to by matching the bill to the payment. So if I enter a bill, for example, and I'm just going to call it a bill to this is, let's just say, miscellaneous vendor. I'm going to quick add a miscellaneous vendor. I'm going to say the date. Let's make it 09/15/20, and then I'm going to say, and the current date note is October. So I'm going to try to enter the bill in the prior month so that I can have one coming due in the current month. And then I'm going to say this is going to be, let's say, for $1,000, and the expense is I'm going to put it to miscellaneous expense, and I'll set up the miscellaneous expense just for the practice purpose here, and I'll set up as an expense account. Now I'm going to say this repeats, so we're going to go up and memorize the transaction. So I'm going to go to the edit drop down, and then I'm going to go down to memorize the bill. Memorize the bill. Now our options, then we can name it. So it could just be miscellaneous. I might want to rename it to, whatever the current name or the best name to tell us of this memorized transactions. It's going to happen repeatedly. We can have it add to my reminders list, which will give us basically a reminder of it. Or we can say, if I wanted to not delete it, but not show it, then I can say, do not remind me of this. Maybe I'll turn it back on later. And then we can have the automatic transaction, which would be to record the bill automatically. So in our case, we might want it to just remind us to enter the bill periodically. And this might be more used if I was to enter like a check maybe. Or maybe I wanted to record the bill automatically. Then I can track it in the bill payment and either write a check for it at some future point or tie it out to something that clears the bank, say in the bank feeds. So I'm going to say, go ahead and give me a reminder this time, which is probably one of the more common items. And then I'm going to say, remind me monthly. So it's going to basically remind me in the next month. I'm going to say, remind me the next date. Remind me on 10/15/20. And that means it's going to be reminding me now because that's past due according to the current date. So I'm going to say, okay. And then I'll record this transaction. I'm going to say, save and close. And then in the reminders up top, if I select the reminders or in my little item up top, then we have the memorized transaction and it's red. So I got to record this memorized transaction. If I close this back out, and I also can see in the lists drop down, the memorized transactions list in the list, and I have two now. There's our miscellaneous transactions for the memorized transaction. If I was to go up to, say, the reminders up top, and I double click on this reminder, that basically takes me to the list. Next due date on the 10/15. If I double click on that item, then it's going to set up our transaction. There's the transaction that has been memorized, which I can then automatically record or just complete the recording process by saying save and close. Save and close. Now it's been recorded. If I go back up to the memorized transactions, then we no longer have the memorized transaction, but now we have the bills that we need to pay that are past due on the left-hand side. Upcoming transactions not past due yet are on the right-hand side. So we got to pay this bill that the date hasn't passed yet. So it's not, red at this point. And then if I close this back out, then of course, to pay the bill would be on this side of the pay bill items. And so these would be the bills that basically we had entered there that we could check off and make the payment for. So that's a quick example of it. Now, a list of types of transactions that you may then memorize. This could be useful for some different types of transactions, oftentimes for outgoing types of transactions. So for money that's going out in some way, you might have loan or lease payments. And again, these are payments that are typically going to be standardized. So the lease is going to happen every month. So you might have the reminder. It might be in the form of a bill that will remind you that you're going to say, hey, remind me that I have to enter a bill to enter the lease payment. Or you might have the bill record automatically so that then it'll show up as something that you have to pay. So you might just say, just record the bill each time. Remind me then in my bill payment section that I need to pay it. That'll just show up there and I'll need to pay it. Or you might have the money taken out directly from your checking account using an automatic transfer, an electronic transfer. And you might have bank feeds that kind of match up to the lease payments, or many of these payments that are repetitive. It may then still be useful for you to enter the transaction as a bill on your side, so that you still have that double matching system where you're entering it, you expect this to happen, and then you expect it to clear the bank. If for whatever reason it doesn't clear the bank, the electronic transfer doesn't happen, then you'll see that because you entered the bill and it didn't match up to the payment that was made. So those are some kind of ways you can line up some of these payments. And obviously the rule here would be these are payments that we expect to be happening on a regular basis, and at least have the time and or amount be the same, and typically both of those things be the same. So we might have reoccurring bills within QuickBooks that we can enter, reoccurring checks in QuickBooks for software or personal services paid on regular amounts or intervals. So like anything that we're paying on a regular amount, like the rent, or say that we're paying like software payments that we pay on a monthly basis for the software usage that we need to input. We could have that, insurance payments and whatnot. Health insurance is common. If we pay that on a monthly basis, then again, something that we can expect to happen. We probably want to remind us on a monthly basis. Electronic withdrawals, if we have a withdrawal of some kind, then we can record that monthly, and of course the rent. So then on the sales side, we could do memorized transactions on the sales side of things as well, the revenue side of thing. Reoccurring sales transactions from service or products supplied monthly. So if we have a standard kind of service type of setup and we have a reoccurring sales transaction, we might, on the sales side, report that transaction at least as a memorized transaction or as a reminder, so that we can double check that sales transaction is going through. So if we collect on rent, if we're the collector of rent and we expect to be receiving rent on a monthly basis, then we might have a reminder. And again, that can be kind of a double check that we have indeed, gotten the rent, right? We can double check by doing the reminder on it. And then we have the monthly installment payments due from customers. So if it's a monthly payment that's due in some way, shape, or form, if we're a software company, for example, or something like that, and they're paying us, an installment type of format, then it's a reoccurring transaction. We can memorize it. Reoccurring journal entries. These are often like month-end type of transactions, something like depreciation. If we calculate the depreciation, we're using straight line depreciation, and we want to do the same transaction each month to record the depreciation of a particular piece of equipment, then we can simply memorize that transaction and allow it to just record that depreciation on a monthly basis. Other kinds of adjusting entries that are typically done at the end of the month, if similar, we could do the same thing. If you have like prepaid insurance, for example, and you're trying to allocate the insurance on a monthly basis because you paid for like a year's worth of insurance and now you want to allocate it out on a monthly basis, you can just memorize that journal entry because it'll be the same at the end of each month, and it should record that transaction at the end of each month. So other adjusting entries, again, are things that you might do on the journal entry side of things. So those are a few examples on when to use the memorized transactions. We'll take a look at some of those examples in future presentations.